Hi guys and welcome. This is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, artist, memoir writer, bipolar psychiatric survivor, and your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast, the place that offers an alternative perspective on mental illness, highlighting creativity, non-conventional healing, and breaking on through to the other side. If you are ready for a new narrative on the mental realm that celebrates crazy and cool without penalty, then Not As Crazy As You Think is for you. Hello, this is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast. Today, I have a very exciting guest. Her name is Kellie Snider, and she's an artist, writer, speaker, and behavior analyst, earning her BS and MS degrees in behavior analysis from the University of North Texas. She is now looking at and speaking honestly about history and politics in the U.S., specifically on how white supremacy got woven into American life so deeply. As a social media influencer, her TikTok and Instagram accounts are very popular, and she invites her audience to get curious about the hard questions and the truth about white people's role in perpetuating racism. Thank you for being here, Kellie. It's truly an honor.
Thank you so much for having me. It's kind of a surprise to me to be on podcasts and things. It is all new to me, but I'm in it for the long haul. We'll see where things go.
People don't understand what systemic racism actually is, but you compile a wealth of information based on first sources that you provide on your pages that are educating people in a way that's uniquely modern and vital right now as our democracy is in this state of erosion. You didn't expect to be doing this work of unlearning for people. Can you describe your turning point where you knew you needed to use your platform to pull the curtain back on whiteness and what it's done, calling white folks in, not out as you describe it, to do better?
I've always cared about this issue. I have a nephew who is Black, and I lived around a lot of Latino people in Texas because there are a lot of Latino people there. And here in Pittsburgh, two of my closest friends are Latino and their families, of course. And one friend has two mixed race sons. And so it has always mattered to me. But when Trump was elected for the second time in November, it was very upsetting, and I'm like, I've got to deal with all this angst.
Mm-hmm.
So, in November, when Trump was elected for the second time, I went into a deep depression, and I didn't know how to deal with it. So I started a series of paintings that you can see on my website. And, that helped a lot. I was painting full time at the time. And then he was inaugurated, and he started immediately with the restrictions on LGBTQ people and all the stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And I was horrified. So I had all of these thoughts and things to process, and I started just venting on my pages. And after a while, I had this question: when did we become a country that would elect on purpose Donald Trump two times? And I'm like, because this is unbelievable. Even though I have multiple relatives that are very much MAGA, I don't get it, and they won't talk to me about it. So I had this big question, which was, how did we become a nation that would vote for Donald Trump twice, knowing what he already did in his first term? And of course, I didn't have an answer, but I thought, okay, I'm going to start, just for a personal exercise, I'm going to start going through, United States history to find a point at which something happened that made us the kind of country that would vote twice for a white supremacist.
Mm.
So I went back to civil rights, to Jim Crow, to reparations, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War. I literally went back to the very beginning of the country, not the beginning of the country, but the beginning of white people being here.
Mm.
And there was never a point that we weren't this country.
Yeah.
There was never a before racism in the United States of America.
Yeah.
It has always been there. It is part of our blood. So all this time I was sharing my feelings. I wasn't really sharing a lot of facts at the very beginning. I was just sharing that because I was pissed off, you know? So I'm posting on, social media, just venting, nothing really formulated, no plan. But people started responding and responding a lot. And I was afraid that I would get really awful comments from, MAGAs and so forth.
Yeah.
But they weren't. They were these wonderful human beings on this earth, and they just welcomed me into this space with open arms. And my following just started skyrocketing. I had been stuck on as an artist where I posted my art and, process videos. I had been stuck at like 365 followers for years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now I have 173,000 or something like that.
It's amazing.
And it's only been like 5 or 6 months.
Wow.
So clearly this is something that people want to hear about. So the next thing I worried about was that I would be stepping on the Black communities or the POC community's toes by, speaking about this. But first of all, it was being so welcomed by so many people. The comments I get sometimes just make me want to cry with joy and appreciation. But
how did the Black and Brown community respond?
The Black and Brown community was utterly amazing, beyond my wildest dreams. I never dreamed that the whole thing would take off. I was just doing it more or less to purify my soul, I guess, or to feel like I was doing something. I was venting.
Yeah.
But they were so wonderful and so supportive that I realized that this is a topic that we need to talk about, because Black history is not just about Black people. I mean, there are things like individuals who did amazing things, and that is pure Black history. But there are things like, reparations and the Civil War and slavery and all that stuff that didn't happen by Black people alone. It happened, it was a white initiative to create the system that we live in now. So we need to be able to look at it honestly and to sit with it and get used to the idea that, yes, we have a responsibility to do something, whatever our skill set is, whatever our availability is, to remedy this problem. And I guess one thing that drives me crazy is when people say that, I'm not racist, so I don't need to do anything. Or this one comes up a lot. I didn't ever own any slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, well, no, I know you didn't. And every Black person alive knows that you personally didn't own slaves,
Right.
but white people did that. And, white people created the system, and then we started making laws that were never going to go away
Yes.
and that are with us today. And we keep making laws. And now that we've got Trump in the presidency, it's just exploded.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the community of people that were already racist is empowered to come out and just be obnoxious about it.
Yes.
And so those of us who are compassionate need to say something.
Yes, absolutely.
Do our part. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's talk about some of those laws or, I find it really interesting. I mean, you go way back, but you do talk about the Jim Crow laws that were in at first on the books, but they ended up creating laws that were put into effect because those things were never taken care of. And, we always hear, you hear it in people who are speaking flippantly with a racist tone. Oh, I'm tired of hearing that, the black people have been kept down. That's a real thing. And
Yeah.
you beautifully bring it to light with all of the things that you mentioned. And one of the things I love that you talk about is how reparations were paid out to the white people. And, can you share a little bit about that kind of
Yeah.
history?
That shocked me. I grew up, I was born in 57, so I'm not a spring chicken. I've been around the block a couple of times. And when I was in public school, we were taught that, there was slavery, and then the wonderful white people had the Civil War, and the slavery ended, and everything was better from there after. And there is a tremendous lack of awareness that it didn't go away. First of all, reparations, like 40 acres and a mule.
Mm.
I thought that was this wonderful thing that, okay, we admit we shouldn't have ever enslaved people. And so we're going to give them all 40 acres and a mule so they can get a start. Nobody told me until I started digging for myself that they gave the land back when Lincoln died and Watsi took over, or Jackson stepped up. He undid a significant portion of the things that were supposed to benefit Black people, former slaves.
Mm.
And he took land from people that were already living on it and gave it back to the very same people that had enslaved them or someone else before.
Mm.
And I had no idea about that. I thought we solved that problem. That's what I was taught.
Yeah.
And I think most white people are taught that, at least of my generation. I don't, well, I know it's not being taught now because you're not allowed in schools. You know more about this than I, but it's not like you can teach the wide open truth in school today.
Well,
So
yeah.
if somebody doesn't just say, tell them, like, wow, did you know this happened?
Mm.
They're not ever going to learn. And,
Right.
like I said, the only reason I learned was because I was specifically digging for some place in time where I could say, okay, if we did this thing, we could undo all of this. And there isn't such a place. So we've got
Yeah.
to build it ourselves.
Right. Right. It's interesting, this whole DEI, this is where it started for me, realizing that this time he's just Trump's second administration. He's just going as hard as he can on getting rid of all the evidence. That's what DEI for me is. And I work in a school system that's right outside of New York City. So it's probably about 98% people of color, black and brown. and also Muslim, I mean, but that's included. And I work in the county right above New York City, which is Westchester County. At the top of the county where I live, so I travel 45 minutes a day to go south. At the top of the county, a lot of red. It's a little MAGA community, And so it's so different just in the same county, 40 minutes away. What's taught, what's acceptable. Like, we wouldn't even think about not teaching DEI, whether Trump does it. Well, what is he going to do? Walk into our schools? Like, we're just like, forget it. Of course, we're going to keep talking about it. But just last year, when my son was still in the high school in my community, they had a big upset because somebody was teaching one of these books I think that you had on your list. And they wanted to get rid of the truth. They kept saying that white kids are feeling bad about themselves, which is so ridiculous. Like, what are you feeling bad about what this white person did a long time ago? But once you start erasing history, it's like you can't make proper decisions in the present for the future. Right. So it's like they don't want people to know those facts because they're horrendous. Do you think that has a lot to do with like the book banning of today? This new wave that's coming through, like with the Moms of Liberty. There's this documentary that I just went to see. It's called The Librarians. And they shed light on all of the book banning that's going on across the country. And it's just unbelievable. Yeah, you should try. It's hard to catch because it was only in a few theaters and one of them was in New York City. So that I ran down there to see it. But it's getting awards. Probably within the year it'll come on, a streaming service. So it's called The Librarians, and it's based on a book. And the librarians are on the front lines right now. So it is so important. Also, I love what you do with always putting all the sources out there because, if you want to learn more, you can learn more because you're providing that. So I'm sure, and one of the things I also, just to go back for a moment about how the community is responding to you. So one of the things that I find again and again when I read through some of the comments is that the Black and brown community is just like, we kind of knew all that. We knew a lot of this history. We knew a lot of this.
That's probably the comment I get most of all. We already knew that.
But that's why they're so appreciative that you are speaking to the white people. Because, to be fair to white people who are quiet about their racism or they don't even realize they're racist, they're like, oh, that's not me. They weren't, really given all the facts. So how can they know?
Yeah, sometimes it's not even racism, it's privilege.
Yes.
It's just like ignorance, really, we just haven't been exposed. And that's part of that systemic racism. If we don't know about it, we're not going to complain about it.
Right.
So they don't want those kids to know about it because, kids grow up to be, they become teenagers, they become young adults, and they protest and they
That's right.
get jobs where they, do things about this, and they don't want that.
Right.
They want them to, study whatever. And all the stuff is good to study, but they don't even want them to go to college, really.
Yeah,
they just want them. They don't want us to know. They want to keep us dumb.
Yeah. It's how they can keep their power, right?
Yeah, we should all be angry about that.
Yeah.
We should all be furious about that.
Absolutely. Okay, so one of the things that you mentioned about this phrase that W.E.B. Du Bois said, wages of whiteness. It's fascinating to me. Can you explain a little bit of what that means and how it's being kind of played out now, all these years later?
Well, it's something that's been going on throughout our country's history. And it started way back, I forget what year, but it started, way before the Civil War. And there was an event called Bacon's Rebellion. And basically, poor white people and either enslaved or poor freemen teamed up to object to the stuff that was being done to them, and things they were being prevented to do. And this made the rich people mad, and the people in control, of course, the people in control were the rich people too. So they found a really nifty tool for preventing them from liking each other, and that was simply, they needed to make one feel better about themselves than the other without having to give them anything. And basically it was, well, you may be poor, but at least you're not black. And that has persisted until this day. You may be, they have never received, the white people have never received one tangible benefit from this. They didn't get any extra money. They're not getting anything from it except a little ego boost. And so they that is the psychological wage of whiteness, and it is ongoing, alive and well today.
You bring up a lot of truth about how these dog whistles have been sounding for a while, right? Under Nixon, Reagan, Bush, they just said different things like that welfare queen thing. And now Trump's saying that quiet part out loud, And so what do you think the consequences regarding our civil rights are, going to play out? I mean, how is this going to continue? And what has Trump done so far? I mean, we both, have been witnessing, how he's trying to lock in and engineer these systems so that racism continues to thrive. Do you think that he's going to succeed in this area?
Well, unless the Congress grows a backbone, he is succeeding.
We're talking about racism, and racism has always been around, and I've sensed it, I've known it, I've seen it. But this renewed white supremacy under the Christian tent is very weird to me. White Christianity or I should say Christianity in general in the Protestant sect, it's been so influenced by charismatic preachers, people taking it in all these different directions, so that it's so far away from what Jesus's original message was, which is blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of God, and all this stuff. The meek inherit the earth, all this stuff. And it's like how what I love most about so many of the things that you bring to light is really making that clear. Because I don't think a lot of people are aware of how, this white supremacy has been steeped in the teachings of many of the churches of the South. Now, can you elaborate on that?
A little bit. Frankly, you can go back to the slavery period when they wrote a new Bible called the Slave Bible. And it was Bible stuff, but it cherry picked the stuff that was about how to be a good slave. And it took out stuff like Exodus and, escaping persecution and all that stuff. It kept the persecution part, but it's like it redefined it entirely. And it seems to me now, I am not a Christian anymore. I grew up in a fundamentalist Christian church, but I am convinced of this. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not able to make this diagnosis, but I believe what we've got is a cult of personality, which is we take what he says, who he is, as the Lord, as God, as the most important thing. And it's like his words supersede, override the Bible. His because how can someone who has like certain members of my family, they have always been very deep Christians, and now they're also very strong MAGAs.
Mm.
And they still claim both sides of that, but they are not compatible. What
Right.
you've got, um, I mean, there's rough stuff in the Bible, but you've got Jesus saying to, welcome your neighbors from another land and all of this stuff. And we've got, um, you know, alligator Alcatraz and all, our Auschwitz or whatever they called it.
Yeah.
And, people being lost. And, I tried to have a conversation about it with my sister one time. And she said, well, I'm like, why are you opposed to people coming from Mexico? They're completely poor and destitute. Some places they may come from are dangerous. Many of them have been threatened. They're taking their families to a place, they're taking great personal risk to get their families to safety. Isn't that a moral thing? Isn't that what Jesus would want them to do? And she's
Right.
like, well, no, because they're taking things that should go to our children.
Oh
And
my
I'm like,
gosh.
that is not Jesus.
Right.
It's not Jesus. That is um, evil.
Yeah.
That is fascism. It's we don't want to share anything. We've got plenty, but we're not
Hmm.
going to share it. Now we're not even, with this government shutdown, we don't even share it with our own citizens that have always, people that work for the federal government are going to food banks. And sometimes the food banks are so overwhelmed just with them that they don't have any more food.
Yeah.
And that's the America we're living in. And that's the conflict. What's the word where you believe one thing and you also believe a completely opposite thing?
Cognitive dissonance.
Yes,
Yes.
cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
It's just like how can you even go there? You're not dumb people. And that's another thing. I think at first, for a long time, I thought, well, these are just all a bunch of idiots.
Hmm.
But the thing is, a lot of cult members are very smart,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of conditioning that happens in this process of building them up. It's like giving them a cheerleader, which is Trump, like um, he's got all the slogans and he teaches all his people all the slogans, but he's also a bully.
Yeah.
And so they are emulating their savior, said very sarcastically. They're emulating him in their own behavior and getting farther and farther and farther away from
Yeah.
anything that's in Christianity. Um, I, it's it's perplexing, it's disturbing, and it's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I when I look, I just hope my sister doesn't listen to this, although maybe it would be a good thing. But
Mhm.
she has, through her life, been the most loving and kind person in the world. I mean, she has brought people to live in her home when they didn't have another place to go. And she's just generous and kind and a MAGA. And it does not add up for
Right.
me.
Right.
It just
You
doesn't
know,
add up.
my heart really connects here because my family's, it's funny because I think in certain areas, not everybody clings to the MAGA, but they cling to, yes, I voted for Trump. You know what I
Yes,
mean? And
yes,
so my family's in that world. We were Italian immigrants. And I'm thinking, you're only a generation removed from this. Like, how can now I've stopped talking about politics with my family for years, decades,
Me
right?
too.
Because
I have
uh,
given up on it.
yeah, because it's not. Here's the bottom line: they're being lied to, and all they
Yes.
do is listen to Fox News all the time. So
Yes, they get one source of information or very limited sources
yeah,
of information and don't read a book. They don't
right,
look outside. They don't look outside any of it
yeah,
and try to see what else is being said. And it's a shame because they're not stupid. They've been
no.
brainwashed.
They're not. They're completely brainwashed. And I'll tell you, like a cousin of mine even, and I mentioned him one other podcast. I'm not going to mention his name, but brilliant. Brilliant. Like, like tech guy, big tech guy, right? Like, six-figure income, whatever. And he just doesn't read about history and doesn't read about politics. So he just he tunes into his channel. He's getting that thing and he's scared of all the protesters. And I'm like, I've been going to the protests. And so I'm like, no, it's pretty much people like 50 and over. You know what I mean? We're just trying
Yeah,
to,
and it's a love fest. We're all out
yes,
there enjoying each other's company, and people
right,
are walking, yay!
yes. It's like they're so removed from the reality. And I was so happy with the No Kings 2 protest because they really, really, really gave so many trainings on how to be violent and peaceful because
Yeah,
that's the only way that's going to, we have to prove through our actions that we are opposite the regime, right? I mean,
yeah,
and
yeah,
yet, you know, that's falling on deaf ears too, because they're pulling up imagery from all of these different things to piece together on like the White House social media. I mean, it's so sad to me because I always saw America, even though they had things that were wildly biased in news programs, you could still find the truth somewhere, right? There was objective journalism in print.
yeah, and there were a lot of journalists and media companies that were devoted
Yeah.
to being non unbiased,
Yes.
and they don't exist
I
anymore.
know they're all capitulating.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, we've been both watching the destruction and the weakening of our democracy through this capitulation. I mean, my feeling is, you mentioned the word tranquilizing. How being, and I love it because it's really true. If people are comfortable, and they found this in Rome, feed them bread and circuses. They will say yay with the Colosseum. You know what I mean? Like that's all that people really want. They just want that ease of life, that comfort. Do you think that this is part of the problem right now that most people who can make the difference, they're just comfortable?
Yes, I think that's a huge part of the problem that we just, and I'm saying we just in a general scope because it's comfortable being a white person in America.
Yeah.
Unless you work for the government, you don't have a job right now.
Yeah.
Um, but it's it's comfortable. What everything was designed for our comfort, and what's not to love, and
Mhm.
that like we were talking about earlier, everything is geared to prevent us from looking at the hard parts.
Mhm.
And what could be more um, educational than teaching children, okay, this bad thing is happening, or this bad thing happened in the past, and it caused harm in these ways. And here are let's talk about how that can be fixed instead of saying it was fixed, it's in the past.
Right.
But no, we don't want kids thinking that hard about that. We
Yeah.
want them to just go, oh, things are pretty cool right now, so there's nothing that I need to do about it.
Yeah.
And, not it all has to be age appropriate, of course, but teenagers understand a hell of a lot. They're brilliant. and they need help learning how to look at an issue from both sides.
Yes.
And that should be in every high school curriculum, how to feel, how to deal with the fact that people like me did horrible stuff. And I don't want that to be part of my country
Right.
today.
Right.
And we're avoiding that issue. I realize that I did not address most of this when my kids were coming up. I was working, and I had volunteer stuff that I did, and it just wasn't on my radar.
Yeah.
So it's not an excuse. I wish it had been on my radar, frankly, but I didn't teach my children what I wished that I had. Fortunately, they picked it up.
Great.
And they very much support what I'm doing now, and they
Great.
do their own things. But yeah, I mean, this comfort and privilege are two of the biggest problems we've got. And boy, what hard things to address, because they're invisible. It's like the air
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah.
We don't see it. And then when you mention it, like when I mention it on my something about that on my videos, and the black people are saying, we knew that. Why
Yeah.
didn't a lot of them will say, how could you not know that? It's like,
Yeah.
it's not like it's not out there. And it's because nobody pointed me in that direction.
Yeah.
I'm not excusing myself. I'm just saying that I didn't know I needed to look.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem for the white community, such as it is. We're not a unified community, but we just don't know what we don't know. And basically, if people that do figure it out don't start saying anything, they're never going to know, because they're busy.
Absolutely.
They're raising kids. They've got their job. They've got their lawn to mow. And it's not like they need extra stuff to do.
Yeah.
But if you can feed them bite-sized pieces, which is what I try to do, is just feed them a bite-sized piece that maybe they can think about while they're mowing the lawn.
Absolutely. And that's why what you do is so awesome, because it's giving out little pieces. They'll take it home. They'll think about it. They'll digest it for the day, and then they'll come back tomorrow. You know what I mean? And I feel like it's a way for people to get their courage little by little.
Yeah, it's not going to happen all at once.
It's not.
It didn't
It's
happen
not.
all at once for me, either. You've got to find something that's meaningful for you to grab onto.
Yeah. And my son's a white boy. Okay. And one of the things that he's communicated with me, and many podcasters out there who are left leaning, but they're also white men, they have really come to the realization that the white male community is suffering right now because they don't have any figures to look up to except these guys in charge who are just like morally vacant, right? And empty.
Good point.
They do kind of get entertained by people like, say, Charlie Kirk, or who's the other influencer, Nick Fuentes, right?
Yeah.
And they do have this white supremacy that's like, kind of flagrant. And my son doesn't like that part, but he's looking for someone that looks like him.
A role model.
Right?
We all need that, especially kids, especially younger people. But I need it. I need to be able to look out there and see that I'm not a lone voice in the wilderness. Although, I think I would still try to do it if it was just me, but I would certainly be beaten down. I would be a lot more exhausted if I didn't know there were not a huge number, but there are some of us out there.
Yeah.
I want to get us together in a room and just say, you're doing a good thing.
Right.
So
Well, it's interesting because I think that in this journey of people kind of discovering um, generationally what was done wrong. I mean, I was Gen X, so we had all the information given to us, at least in our schools, in New York. Um, it was like, oh, this happened. This is pretty rotten. You know what I mean? Like, this is terrible. Oh, okay, we're gonna make something different. So then, like, people started like running for office and changing things and getting in these positions of influence and making a difference. And, now you have it so that the people who are wanting their power back, and it seems to be a white male thing right now, they are doing these power grabs. But unfortunately, at the same time, there was so much pushback against, like, say, the white male community. They're clinging, and they're tending to connect with, like we just said, these leaders. So I just, realize that if we are to move forward and save, say, the white male of the future, right? And provide the right role model for him. Where does it begin? How does it start? I mean, I look at someone like, say, James Tallarico. He's a good example but he's a state senator in Texas. And he's one that comes out a lot against the hypocrisy in Christianity because he's a Christian preacher or something. But he speaks about it from the Democratic perspective, like, it really means that you're supposed to be good to the poor. So I'm hoping that there's going to be a resurgence of good white men that come out of this movement.
oh wow, yeah.
What I do see is that a lot of people who are in the streets are the good white people who are realizing that they're the ones that have to take their privilege, right, and use it in the right way, because you see the administration saying things like, oh, there's no people of color in the streets, there's all like old white hippies and stuff, and I'm like, because we can be here.
Yeah.
You're not gonna release the Gestapo on us.
Yeah, I marched with my Latina friend, her niece, who looks very Mexican, um, during this last Kings. And there were other Hispanic people in the audience, in the crowd, and it was fine. It
Right.
was fun. It was fine, and nothing bad. I mean, a couple of people. We were at a rally more than a march, and there were a couple of cars that went by and shot us the bird. But
Mm-hmm.
it could have been worse. There
Yeah.
was no ice there. There was nothing like that, and it
Right.
was. I think if people realize how fun it can be when things are going well, the community that you build there, it can be encouraging to participate a little bit more.
So, with everything that's been said, how can white people who are willing to learn and willing to take some kind of course of action wake up from the racism that perhaps they didn't even know they were under? And for those who are racist today, how does it happen? How can a white person wake up out of that racism? I know that you actually recently talked about that. There's like a bunch of things that possibly can occur to get people back on track. Like, what are those things?
Well, one thing that I've talked about a few times is that, well, people will say to me the only way white people will ever change is if it affects them.
Mm-hmm.
And my response to that is the only reason anyone ever changes, and anyone of any race or background, the only reason any of us change is because it affects us.
Right,
That is absolutely not a white thing. That is an everybody thing.
right.
And so I guess we need to look at how does this affect me?
Mm-hmm.
And content creators that are talking about this, there's some amazing ones. There's a Black woman named Ashley the Baroness. Ashley the Baroness. She's on Instagram and TikTok. And she's a Black woman who talks about Black history or Black current events, like all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
There's me. There's a guy called Dixie Whitey, who's a guy from the South, used to be a racist. So there are people out there
Yeah.
that are talking about it. So if you can listen to it in bite-sized pieces, it's easier
Yeah.
rather than trying to get a PhD in one sitting. That's not ever going to happen. You're going to get burned out real fast.
Right. Kellie, you're absolutely right. And your page is something that everybody needs to follow. So let's make sure that our audience has your social media handles. You're mostly on TikTok and Instagram?
Mostly on TikTok and Instagram. I don't totally trust TikTok because they've dinged me for some things. Like, I was trying to sell stuff off of TikTok marketplace, whatever they call it, TikTok
Yeah.
shop, and I would get dinged for everything. So I'm like in the critical zone.
Ah,
I don't know if I'll last there very much longer, but both on there and on Instagram, I am at kellysnider.art. And it's KelliesNider.art.
great. And do you have a website? Because you have some great art too that you're working on.
Yes, it's the same thing. It's KelliesNider.art, which should be convenient, but sometimes it's confusing.
Okay.
And if on that page, you'll see mostly about my art, but I'm starting to add a little bit. And actually, if you scroll down on the page, you will see the last six or several of my Instagram posts. So you can catch it there and, click back through to sign up on Instagram if you want to follow me,
Great.
which I would love.
And is there a way that people can throw you some cash and do you have any like Venmo or coffee,
Yeah, I've got coffee, and it's again, it's at the bottom of my website. There's a way to sign up to donate there. And I just started some levels to try to give some extra stuff to certain people. That is at ko-fi.com/Kellie Snider. And spelling is important because my name's just a little off.
Right, right. Your parents probably never imagined the world we live in today.
Oh, yeah. Well, I married a guy with the last name, and then my first name. I mean, I love my first name. It's just people always think it's a Y.
Right, right. And even Snider, a lot of people think it's a Y too.
Yeah, they think it's a Y.
Yeah. So let me ask you, do you have any last words that you'd like to leave people with?
Yeah. Be kind to yourself. And if you aren't already looking into this, although I imagine you probably are if you're listening to this podcast, but just take it bit by bit. You don't have to get a PhD tonight. An important thing is if you're not already doing something in the anti-racism realm, you don't have to start a movement. You can either join one that's already going on, or you can just speak up. One of the biggest things you can do is you see something unfair happening in front of you, use your white privilege to step in and say something. Like, you can say that it's not okay, especially if it's your house. People don't get to just be racist in your house or in your space, or you can let them know that, our relationship is dependent on you trying harder.
Yeah.
And that's hard. It's awful. It's hard. But it's so important.
Yes.
You may get taunted or even have something ugly said to you, but think about how little that is compared to what people of color experience every day. Like I said earlier, my nephew is, he's mixed race. He identifies as Black. And one day he's trying to walk into his own front door with his own key, and the police stopped him and accused him of breaking in. And he's like, how am I breaking into my own house with my own key? He also is stopped driving while Black. And it's heartbreaking, but it's so common.
Oh, yes.
And we don't ever drive while Black. I rarely get stopped, but even when I was younger and did more speeding, I wasn't afraid I was going to die from a traffic stop. I just was afraid I couldn't afford the ticket. But that's a lot better thing than being afraid you're going to die, which is a very real fear in this world today. So, so just speak up, and do take a little time, to, follow a couple of people that are talking about this in bite-sized pieces, and read some books. I offer a lot of resources in my video notes. So
absolutely. And I actually compiled a list of a lot of those resources. So I'm going to include those on the show description, the show notes. And so people could take a look at some of these suggestions, because some people don't even know where to start. So because I went through so many of your videos to glean that. And I was like, oh my God, like I have to put this on my list. I didn't read a lot of those books. I've read a lot and I haven't read a lot. So there's a lot out there. Yeah. So anyway, Kellie, it's been such a pleasure. And I'm just so thankful that you are continuing on this path. So many people are thankful and really appreciative of your courage. And it takes a lot of courage to do what you're doing. But I want to remind people too, it's small acts of courage we need right now. Because if everybody did small acts, it would be a lot. Yeah. So you're an example of that. So I thank you for your work, and I thank you for your voice. Very unique.
Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody for tuning in and for doing your part. We're all in this together.
Absolutely. Thanks for listening to Not As Crazy As You Think, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And remember, mental health is attainable for anyone, especially those labeled with mental illness. Until next time, peace out.